The autumn breeze whispered through the open windows of Willow Creek Wedding Chapel, carrying the sweet scent of late-blooming roses and fresh beginnings. Emma Martinez stood before the vintage floor-length mirror, her trembling fingers adjusting the delicate lace veil that cascaded down her back. The reflection showed more than just another bride on her wedding day. It revealed a story 25 years in the making, a promise that began with finger paintings and animal crackers. 5 minutes, sweetie, her mother called through the ornate wooden door, voice thick with emotion. Emma closed her eyes, and suddenly she was 4 years old again, wearing her favorite purple polka dot dress in Miss Peterson's preschool class. The memory was as vivid as yesterday's sunlight streaming through rainbow-decorated windows, the smell of crayons and Play-Doh hanging in the air, and Oliver James standing on the reading carpet with chocolate smeared on his chin. While other boys were declaring girls had cooties, Oliver had always been different. He had just shared his last chocolate chip cookie with her, the ultimate gesture of love in preschool currency. That was the moment when it happened. Oliver stood up, his dark curls falling into earnest brown eyes, and made an announcement that would shape their lives forever. I'm going to marry Emma when we grow up because she's the nicest person in the whole wide world, and she always shares her crayons. The class had erupted in giggles, but Miss Peterson, instead of dismissing it as childish play, had captured the moment with her Polaroid camera. In the photo, Oliver stood proudly next to Emma, his gap-toothed grin radiating pure joy while she beamed at him, her pigtails slightly askew and a purple crayon clutched in her tiny hand. I promise, he had said afterward, with all the solemnity a 4-year-old could muster. Cross my heart and hope to eat worms. A knock at the door jolted Emma back to the present. Her sister poked her head in, now a vision in lavender bridesmaid silk. They're ready for you, Em, and you'll never believe who just arrived. Miss Peterson herself. She's carrying some kind of old box. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She knew exactly what was in that box, a Polaroid that had started it all, preserved through 2 decades of change, growth, and unwavering connection. Touching the delicate pearl necklace at her throat, a gift from Oliver on their engagement, she took one last look in the mirror. The little girl in the polka dot dress had grown up, but her eyes still held the same light they had on that fateful day in preschool. Some promises, it seemed, were meant to be kept. Life has a way of weaving patterns that only become clear in retrospect. For Oliver and Emma, growing up as next-door neighbors in suburban Minneapolis wasn't just coincidence, it was the foundation of their story. Their houses sat side by side on Maple Grove Lane, connected by a shared fence that their fathers had long ago installed a gate in, making their backyards one continuous playground of possibilities. Every morning began the same way. Oliver would wait by his front porch, backpack slung over one shoulder, watching for Emma's pink curtains to flutter open. He'd wave, and within minutes, they'd be walking to the bus stop together, trading Pokemon cards or sharing whatever new treasure they'd discovered in their cereal boxes that morning. You don't have to carry my backpack every day, Emma would protest, but Oliver would insist, claiming his mom had taught him to be a gentleman. In reality, Sarah James had simply suggested he be kind. Oliver had added the backpack-carrying tradition all on his own. Their elementary school years unfolded like chapters in a storybook, each season bringing new adventures. In first grade, they turned Oliver's treehouse into a secret laboratory, conducting experiments that mostly involved mixing dirt with water and declaring they'd discovered alien life. Mrs. Martinez would just smile and hose them down in the backyard before dinner. Second grade brought Emma's first dance recital. When stage fright threatened to overwhelm her, she spotted Oliver in the audience, making silly faces and mouthing their secret code word snickerdoodle, named after the cookies they'd learned to bake with Mrs. James. Emma nailed her performance, and afterward, Oliver presented her with a slightly crushed bouquet of dandelions he'd picked himself. The family dynamics between the Jameses and Martinezes grew more intertwined with each passing year. Sunday barbecues became a sacred tradition, with Mr. Martinez and Mr. James taking turns at the grill while debating the merits of different marinades. Their mothers formed a book club that mostly turned into wine and conversation nights, sharing stories and watching their children grow. When Emma's younger sister, Sophia, was born with a heart condition in third grade, the James family became their rock. Sarah James organized meal trains and helped with hospital visits, while Oliver appointed himself Sophia's personal entertainment committee, reading stories and making shadow puppets during her recovery periods. Fourth grade tested their friendship in unexpected ways. Oliver developed an interest in soccer, joining the local youth league. Emma, more drawn to theatre and art, worried they'd drift apart. Instead, Oliver would practice his footwork while Emma rehearsed lines for the school play, each supporting the other's passions. They created their own performance-style soccer theatre where Oliver would dribble the ball between scenes while Emma dramatically narrated his moves. The summer before 5th grade marked a turning point. During their neighborhood's annual block party, Tommy Peterson made fun of Emma's new braces, reducing her to tears behind the Johnsons' garage. Oliver found her there, and instead of his usual jokes to cheer her up, he showed a maturity beyond his years. "You know what those braces mean?" he asked, sitting beside her on the concrete. "They mean you're brave enough to wear metal in your mouth to make your smile even more amazing. That's like being a superhero with a secret identity." Emma had laughed through her tears. "You're so weird, Oliver James." "Yeah, but I'm your weird. And those braces are purple, that's the color of royalty. So technically you're a queen now." The next day at school, Oliver proudly announced to their class that his best friend was secretly royalty, and anyone who couldn't see that clearly needed their eyes checked. Tommy Peterson never bothered Emma again. Their shared backyard became a canvas for imagination. They built snow fortresses in winter, complete with elaborate tunnel systems their parents pretended not to worry about. Spring meant archaeological expeditions where they'd dig up artifacts that Mr. James would secretly bury for them to discover. Summer nights were spent stargazing on old quilts, making up constellations and sharing dreams about the future. "When we get married," Oliver would say matter-of-factly, "we should have a telescope room." Emma would roll her eyes but smile. "We need a cookie room first, for all the snickerdoodles." He'd reply, and they'd pinky swear on it, not realizing their parents were watching from the deck, exchanging knowing looks over coffee mugs. By 6th grade, they'd developed a shorthand all their own. A raised eyebrow from Emma meant "save me from this conversation," while Oliver's nose wrinkle signaled, "let's make an excuse and go play video games." They could communicate entire plans of escape from boring family functions without saying a word. Their teachers had long since given up trying to separate them during class projects. The one-time Mr. Anderson had insisted on splitting them up for a science fair. They'd still managed to create projects that worked together. Oliver's volcano erupted with the exact materials needed for Emma's demonstration on crystal formation. The foundation of their bond went beyond shared activities and secret codes. They understood each other in ways that went deeper than friendship. When Oliver's grandfather passed away in 5th grade, Emma knew exactly when to talk and when to just sit quietly, sharing her lunch desserts with him for weeks, because grief had stolen his sweet tooth. When Emma struggled with math, Oliver never made her feel less than brilliant. He just started turning multiplication tables into crazy stories until the numbers finally made sense. Their families watched this deep connection grow with a mixture of amusement and wonder. "They're either going to get married or end up running a company together," Mr. Martinez would joke. "Probably both, Mrs. James would reply, and they'd all laugh, not realizing just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The summer before freshman year arrived with the weight of change hanging in the Minneapolis air. Neither Oliver nor Emma could have predicted how their lives would transform when Mr. Martinez called for a family meeting that would alter everything. The news hit like a thunderbolt on what should have been a perfect June afternoon. A promotion was taking the Martinez family to Chicago. Emma found Oliver in their treehouse, their sanctuary since childhood, clutching the worn Polaroid from preschool. The setting sun painted shadows across his face as he tried to process the news. "It's only 6 hours away," Emma said, her voice cracking despite her attempt at optimism. "We'll text every day, and there's FaceTime and summer visits." Oliver managed a weak smile. "A promise is a promise, Martinez. Remember this?" He held up the photograph, its edges soft from years of handling. "Distance doesn't change that." The goodbye party was a neighborhood affair that felt more like a wake. Mrs. James' stress baked enough snickerdoodles to feed an army, while Mr. James and Mr. Martinez busied themselves with the grill, neither trusting themselves to speak. Oliver presented Emma with a handmade friendship bracelet, blue and purple threads woven together with meticulous care. "So you don't forget about your future husband," he joked, but his eyes held a seriousness that made Emma's heart ache. The transition to separate lives was harder than either had anticipated. Emma threw herself into theater at her new Chicago high school, finding solace in becoming other characters when being herself hurt too much. Her talent bloomed under the guidance of a passionate drama teacher, and soon she was landing lead roles in school productions. Meanwhile, Oliver channeled his emotions into soccer, pushing himself harder than ever on the field. His natural leadership abilities emerged as he was named team captain by sophomore year. Between practices and games, he joined the debate team, surprising everyone with his eloquent arguments and quick thinking. They tried to maintain their connection through daily texts and weekly video calls, but life had a way of intervening. Emma made new friends in the theatre crowd, while Oliver found himself surrounded by teammates and debate club members who shared his competitive drive. Their first real test came when Oliver started dating Sarah Chen, the brilliant captain of the chess team, during junior year. Emma learned about it through social media, a photo of them at homecoming, Oliver in a suit and Sarah stunning in emerald green. The sight sparked an unexpected jealousy that Emma wasn't ready to analyze. She responded by accepting a date with Jason Martinez, no relation, the charming lead in her school's production of West Side Story. For 3 months, she threw herself into the romance of first dates and stolen kisses between rehearsals, trying to ignore how Jason's jokes never quite landed the way Oliver's did. Neither relationship lasted. Oliver and Sarah parted ways after 6 months. She's amazing, Oliver told Emma during one of their increasingly rare video calls, but something was missing. Emma and Jason drifted apart after the show's run ended, their connection proving as temporary as their stage romance. The distance also brought unexpected opportunities for growth. Without each other's constant presence, they were forced to develop their own identities. Emma discovered a talent for playwriting, creating characters that somehow always had a trace of Oliver in them. Oliver excelled in advanced placement classes, particularly in astronomy perhaps, because it reminded him of all those nights stargazing with Emma. Their families tried to maintain connections too. Mrs. Martinez would send care packages to the James household, filled with Chicago specialties and photos of Emma's performances. Mrs. James kept Oliver's room exactly as it was, just in case Emma visited during breaks. But as the months turned into years, those visits became rarer, complicated by conflicting schedules and growing commitments. Junior year brought college applications and the growing realization that their paths might diverge even further. Emma dreamed of theater programs in New York, while Oliver considered soccer scholarships across the country. Their old promise seemed increasingly like a childhood fantasy, though neither could bring themselves to say it aloud. Yet something remained a thread stronger than distance or time. Every year on the anniversary of the Preschool Promise, one would message the other, still planning on keeping that promise. The response was always the same: cross my heart and hope to eat worms. They dated other people, joined different clubs, and built separate lives. Emma starred in regional theater competitions, her performances gaining attention from college scouts. Oliver led his soccer team to the state championships while maintaining a perfect GPA. They celebrated each other's achievements from afar, but the congratulatory texts felt hollow compared to the hugs they used to share. The distance taught them both crucial lessons about independence and self-discovery. Emma learned to stand on her own, to face her fears without Oliver's encouraging smiles. Oliver discovered that, while soccer brought him acclaim, his true passion lay in the stars, those same stars they used to name together. Their senior year arrived with the promise of new beginnings and the weight of decisions that would shape their futures. Neither knew that fate had its own plans, that their separate paths were about to converge in ways they couldn't imagine. But for now, they were just two teenagers, growing up and apart, holding on to a childhood promise that seemed more distant with each passing day. Yet sometimes, late at night, they'd both find themselves looking at that old Polaroid, Emma's copy slightly water-damaged from tears, Oliver's laminated and tucked safely in his wallet, wondering if some promises were meant to transcend time and distance. Life has a way of orchestrating moments that feel too perfect to be coincidence. On a crisp September morning during freshman orientation at Northwestern University, destiny played its hand. Emma was rushing to her first theater department meeting, clutching a well-worn script and a vanilla latte, when she collided with someone outside the campus coffee shop. Her coffee went flying, papers scattered, and a familiar voice said, "I am so Martinez." She looked up into those unmistakable brown eyes. James. Oliver stood there in his soccer practice gear, as stunned as she was. For a moment neither moved, creating a small island of stillness in the rush of students around them. Then, simultaneously, they burst into laughter and embraced, ignoring the spreading coffee stain on the sidewalk. "What are you?" They both started at once, then laughed again. "Theatre scholarship," Emma explained, gathering her now coffee-stained script. "Soccer scholarship," Oliver replied, already bending to help her collect her papers. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming here?" Emma shrugged, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I wasn't sure I'd get in until the last minute, and then I thought maybe too much had changed." Oliver's response was to pull out his wallet and extract the laminated preschool Polaroid. "Some things don't change, Martinez." Their reunion quickly became the talk of their respective social circles. The theatre kids were fascinated by Emma's childhood fiancé, while Oliver's teammates teased him about his preschool sweetheart. But something was different now. They weren't just the kids who'd shared cookies and crayons anymore. Time and distance had shaped them into more complex versions of themselves. But Emma noticed how Oliver's boyish charm had matured into quiet confidence, how his old habit of running his hands through his curls when nervous remained endearingly unchanged. Oliver found himself captivated by the grace Emma had developed, the way her former shyness had bloomed into magnetic stage presence. They fell into a comfortable routine of coffee meetings between classes and late-night study sessions in the library. Oliver would run lines with Emma for her auditions, though his dramatic skills hadn't improved much since their backyard performances. Emma attended every one of his soccer games, cheering louder than anyone when he scored. But beneath their rekindled friendship ran an undercurrent of uncertainty. Both had dated other people during their years apart, had built separate lives and identities. Emma was dating Mark, a charismatic senior in the theatre department who shared her passion for Shakespeare. Oliver had a casual thing going with Jessica from his chemistry class, who made him laugh and challenged his mind. The turning point came during a midnight cramming session in the library. They were supposedly studying for finals, but really just trading memories of their childhood adventures. "Remember when we tried to dig to China in your backyard?" Emma giggled, doodling in the margins of her notes. "And hit a water pipe instead," Oliver grinned. "Dad was so mad, but not as mad as when we tried to turn the treehouse into a rocket ship." "Using actual fireworks," Emma finished, shaking her head. "Then, more softly, we were so sure we could do anything together." Oliver looked at her for a long moment, then pulled out the Polaroid, his constant companion all these years. "Do you ever think about that promise?" Emma's heart skipped a beat, but she forced a casual tone. "Which one? The time you promised to eat a worm if I cleaned your room, or when you swore you'd become a professional dinosaur hunter?" "You know which one." The air between them crackled with unspoken possibility. But before either could say more, Mark appeared, looking for Emma. The moment shattered like spun glass. The next few weeks were a dance of almost moments and careful distances. They both ended their other relationships, knowing something wasn't right, but afraid to acknowledge why. Emma threw herself into rehearsals for A Midsummer Night's Dream, while Oliver spent extra hours on the soccer field. Their friends watched with varying degrees of exasperation. "You're both idiots," Emma's roommate declared one night. "Everyone can see you're in love with each other." "It's complicated," Emma would protest. "We have this whole history." "Exactly," her roommate countered. "You have a history most people would kill for." Oliver faced similar interventions from his teammates. "Dude," his best friend said after practice, "you carry a picture of her in your wallet. From preschool. That's not exactly subtle." But it was the complications that held them back. What if they tried and failed? What if they lost not just their potential romance but their friendship too? The weight of their shared past felt simultaneously like their greatest strength and their biggest obstacle. They danced around their feelings through midterms and finals, through soccer victories and theatre triumphs. Each proud moment felt slightly incomplete without acknowledging what was growing between them. Their eyes would meet across crowded rooms, holding conversations they weren't ready to voice. Until one rainy evening, when Emma's lead co-star dropped out of a performance with laryngitis an hour before showtime. In desperation, she called Oliver. "I know it's insane," she said, "but you've run these lines with me 100 times. Please." Oliver, who'd rather face an entire opposing soccer team alone than speak in public, didn't hesitate. "Cross my heart and hope to eat worms." He was terrible. He fumbled lines, stood in the wrong places, and nearly knocked over a crucial piece of scenery. But he never took his eyes off Emma, and in every scene they shared, something electric passed between them that had the audience holding their breath. After the show, still in their costumes in an empty theater, they finally faced what they'd been avoiding. Some promises, they realized, weren't just made to be kept, they were meant to lead you home. The autumn wind scattered golden leaves across Northwestern University's campus as Emma hurried to her first theater department meeting. Clutching her worn copy of The Glass Menagerie and a steaming cup of coffee, she rounded the corner near the student center, and her world tilted on its axis. "Watch out," a familiar voice called, but it was too late. The collision sent her coffee flying and pages fluttering through the air like confused butterflies. As she steadied herself, ready to apologize, she found herself staring into a pair of brown eyes she'd know anywhere. Martinis. James. And Oliver stood before her in his soccer practice gear, those familiar curls shorter now but still unruly. For a heartbeat, neither moved, creating an island of stillness in the rushing stream of students around them. Then they were laughing and hugging, oblivious to the spreading coffee stain on the sidewalk. "Soccer scholarship," he explained, already kneeling to help gather her scattered script pages. "Theater scholarship," she replied, still stunned. "How did we not know we were both coming here?" Oliver's smile turned sheepish. "I tried to tell you at graduation, but your phone was disconnected." "We moved again," Emma said softly. "Dad's company, it was all so last minute." The awkward silence that followed spoke volumes about the distance that had grown between them. But then Oliver reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn, laminated photo, their preschool portrait, preserved through all these years. "Some things don't change, Martinez." Their reunion rippled through their separate social circles like a stone dropped in still water. The theater department buzzed with curiosity about Emma's childhood sweetheart, while Oliver's teammates mercilessly teased him about his preschool bride. But beneath the jokes lay something more complex, a shift in the foundation of their friendship that neither was quite ready to acknowledge. They fell into an easy rhythm of coffee meetings and study sessions, bridging the gap of their years apart. Emma discovered that Oliver had developed a dry wit that perfectly complemented her more dramatic flair. Oliver found himself mesmerized by the quiet confidence Emma had gained, so different from the shy girl who'd left Minneapolis. "You're still terrible at Shakespeare," Emma laughed one evening as they ran lines in the library. Oliver had volunteered to help her prepare for an audition, despite his notorious stage fright. "Hey, I'll have you know I got a B in English literature," he protested, throwing a wadded paper at her. "That's because you wrote your thesis on astronomy in A Midsummer Night's Dream," she teased. "You just wanted an excuse to talk about stars." Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, both remembered countless nights spent stargazing in their shared backyard. The memory hung between them like an unfinished sentence. But life had a way of complicating simple moments. Emma was dating Marcus, a charming senior who played jazz piano and wrote her poetry. Oliver had started seeing Rebecca from his physics class, who challenged him intellectually and shared his love of soccer. The first real crack in their careful friendship appeared during the winter formal. Emma attended with Marcus, wearing a midnight blue dress that made her look like a modern-day princess. Oliver arrived with Rebecca, handsome in a classic black suit. They danced with their respective dates, but their eyes kept finding each other across the room. "You're in love with her," Rebecca said quietly, during a slow dance. It wasn't a question. "She's my best friend," Oliver protested weakly. "That's not what I said." The following week, both Oliver and Emma found themselves single again. Neither talked about why their relationships had ended, but they started spending even more time together, as if magnetized by an unspoken force. Their friends watched with varying degrees of exasperation. "You're both being ridiculous," Emma's roommate Sarah declared one night. "Everyone can see what's happening here." "It's complicated," Emma would say, staring at her script without really seeing it. "We have this whole history." Exactly, Sarah would counter. "You have what most people spend their whole lives looking for." The turning point came during midterms week. Emma was struggling with her astronomy elective, a class she'd only taken because Oliver loved the stars so much. After their third late-night study session, she finally asked the question that had been haunting her. "Do you ever think about that promise?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Oliver didn't need to ask which promise she meant. He pulled out the Polaroid, its edges soft from years of handling, every day. "We were just kids," Emma said, but her hand found his across the table. "Maybe kids know something we forget when we grow up," Oliver replied, intertwining their fingers. "Like how sometimes the simplest answers are the right ones." The next few weeks were a delicate dance of rediscovery. They went on their first official date to a tiny Italian restaurant off campus, where they talked for hours about everything and nothing. Oliver confessed that he'd never shared his last cookie with anyone else. Emma admitted she'd written him into every play she'd ever created. But doubt still lingered. What if they ruined their friendship? What if the weight of their shared history proved too heavy? What if growing up meant growing apart? These fears came to a head during the spring theatre production. Emma was playing Juliet, and her co-star, Thomas, was clearly interested in more than just their on-stage chemistry. Oliver attended every rehearsal, his presence both a comfort and a complication. One night, after a particularly intense scene, Thomas asked Emma out for coffee. Before she could respond, she caught Oliver's eye across the auditorium. In that moment, 20 years of shared history, understanding, and love crystallized into perfect clarity. "I'm sorry," she told Thomas, "but I made a promise a long time ago." That night, Oliver and Emma sat on the steps of the theatre building until dawn, talking about their fears, their hopes, and the future they wanted to build together. Sometimes, they realized, the longest journey leads you right back where you started, but with the wisdom to appreciate what was there all along. Summer arrived with the news that Oliver's parents were downsizing, planning to move from the house that held 2 decades of memories. Emma flew back to Minneapolis to help with the packing, stepping into Oliver's childhood bedroom for the first time in years. The walls still bore the glow in the dark stars they'd arranged to match their made-up constellations. "Mom saved everything," Oliver said, opening boxes labeled in his mother's neat handwriting, Oliver Grade 1, Oliver Emma Summer Projects. The afternoon sun streamed through the window as they excavated their shared history. Emma lifted a shoebox tied with faded ribbon. Inside, they found a treasure trove, the time capsule they'd buried when they were 8, unearthed before the Martinez's moved to Chicago. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a crude marriage certificate decorated with crayon hearts, their childish signatures scrawled at the bottom. "This certifies that Oliver James and Emma Martinez will get married when they grow up," she read aloud, voice catching. Witnessed by Mrs. Whiskers, she laughed. "Your cat was our witness." She was very distinguished, Oliver defended, but his eyes were fixed on Emma's face. "We were so sure back then." When did everything get so complicated, Emma wondered, sifting through more mementos, friendship bracelets, school Valentine's cards, Polaroids from every stage of their lives. At the bottom of the box, they found a DVD labeled first-grade play Romeo Juliet, sort of Mrs. James had filmed their backyard performance, where they'd rewritten Shakespeare to include dinosaurs and space travel. They watched it on Oliver's laptop, crying with laughter at their 6-year-old selves. "You were a better Romeo then than you were in college," Emma teased, referencing his emergency performance. "Hey, I got through it without knocking over any more scenery, didn't I?" He paused the video. "You know why I did it, right?" Emma's heart skipped. "Because you're a good friend. Because I've never been able to say no to you. Not since you shared your crayons in preschool." The air between them shifted, heavy with 2 decades of unspoken feelings. Emma found herself thinking about their recent dating experiences, how every relationship had felt somehow incomplete. She'd dated actors who could quote Shakespeare perfectly, but didn't understand why she kept a box of crayons in her desk drawer. Oliver had dated brilliant women who shared his love of soccer and science, but never quite got why he insisted on sharing his last cookie. "I tried, you know," Emma said softly, "to find what we had with other people, but no one else knows." "Knows what?" "The whole story. How you fought Tommy Peterson for making fun of my braces. How we turned every cardboard box into a spaceship. How you learned all my lines just to help me rehearse, even though you hate performing." Oliver reached for her hand, a gesture so familiar it made her chest ache. "Do you remember what I said when you got the lead in our town in junior high? That I was going to be famous someday, and you wanted my autograph early." "No, well, yes, but after that, I said that no matter what happened, no matter where life took us, I'd always be your biggest fan. not because of some childhood promise, but because you're you. They spent hours going through the boxes, each item unlocking memories the soccer trophy Oliver had won in 9th grade, with Emma's good luck charm still taped to the base programs from every play Emma had performed in, carefully preserved the telescope they'd saved up for together, planning to explore their backyard constellations. Modern technology had kept them connected through the year's texts, social media, video calls, but sitting here among the physical artifacts of their shared history made everything feel more real, more urgent. Their phones buzzed with notifications from dating apps they'd both installed in attempts to meet new people, but the alerts seemed hollow compared to the weight of the memories surrounding them. "I went on 17 first dates last year," Emma confessed, organizing photos into neat piles. "And every single time I found myself telling stories about you. My therapist says I'm using our childhood as a shield against real intimacy." Oliver laughed. "My last girlfriend said I had emotional walls constructed entirely of preschool memories." Were they right? Maybe. Or maybe we've been looking for something we already had. They ordered pizza and sat on his bedroom floor, surrounded by the evidence of their intertwined lives. Emma showed him the playbills from her recent performances, while Oliver shared photos from his soccer championships. But now, each achievement story ended with "I wished you were there," or "I looked for you in the crowd." As the sun set, casting long shadows across their memory-strewn floor, Oliver pulled out his wallet and extracted the laminated preschool Polaroid, his constant companion through all these years. "I think we've been overthinking this," he said quietly. "Maybe it's as simple as it was back then. You're still the nicest person I know, and you still share your metaphorical crayons. Everything else, all our experiences, our growth, our separate journeys, just made what was already there stronger." Emma looked around at their shared history scattered across the floor, 20 years of friendship, love, and unwavering support documented in photos, trinkets, and treasures. Then she reached into her own wallet and pulled out her copy of the same Polaroid, worn soft at the edges from years of handling. "So what are you saying, James?" "I'm saying some promises aren't meant to be outgrown. They're meant to grow with you." After that night among their childhood memories, everything changed yet stayed exactly the same. They dated properly this time, though their friends joked that they'd been dating for 20 years already. Oliver took Emma to the planetarium for their first official date, where they made up new constellations just like they used to. Emma took him to an interactive theater performance where, thankfully, he wasn't required to act. The proposal, when it came, was both carefully planned and wonderfully spontaneous. They had just moved into their first apartment together in New York, where Emma had landed a role in off-Broadway production and Oliver had taken a position teaching astronomy at a local university. The apartment was a mess of boxes fitting parallel to all those cardboard spaceships of their youth. "Remember when we used to turn boxes into rocket ships?" Emma asked, sitting on their empty apartment floor, surrounded by packing materials. "We still can," Oliver grinned, pulling out a marker. But instead of drawing spacecraft windows, he reached into one of the boxes and pulled out something that made Emma gasp, their old preschool Polaroid. Getting down on one knee, he held up a ring. "Emma Martinez, 23 years ago, I promised to marry you because you were the nicest person in the whole wide world, and you always shared your crayons. Today, I'm promising to marry you because you're still the kindest soul I know, you chase your dreams with everything you have, and you make me want to be better every single day. Will you help me keep that preschool promise?" Through happy tears, Emma nodded. "Yes, but only if you promise to share your last cookie with me for the rest of our lives." The wedding plans came together like a dream. They chose Willow Creek Wedding Chapel, with its vintage charm and garden perfect for stargazing. Their families threw themselves into the preparations with joy, Mrs. James baking countless sample cakes, Mr. Martinez using his architectural skills to design the perfect outdoor reception space. But life had one more test in store for their love. 2 weeks before the wedding, Emma's sister Sophia's heart condition suddenly worsened. The same condition that had brought their families closer in childhood now threatened to overshadow their happiness. Sophia needed emergency surgery, throwing all their carefully laid plans into chaos. Oliver didn't hesitate. "We'll postpone," he said immediately, already reaching for his phone to call vendors. "Family comes first, you taught me that." But Sophia, from her hospital bed, refused to hear of it. "You've been waiting since preschool," she said weakly. "I'm not missing this wedding." Besides, I need something to fight for. The next 2 weeks became a blur of hospital visits and wedding preparations. Oliver and Emma took shifts staying with Sophia, coordinating with doctors while finalizing seating arrangements and flower selections. Their love grew stronger through the crisis, proving that their bond could weather any storm. Their friends and family rallied around them. The theater company Emma worked with rearranged rehearsal schedules. Oliver's students brought study materials to the hospital so he could grade papers during his vigils. Their wedding vendors showed unexpected flexibility, moved by their story and dedication to family. The day before the wedding, the doctors delivered the news they'd been praying for. Sophia's surgery had been successful. Though she would need time to recover, she insisted on being wheeled down the aisle as the maid of honor. The ceremony itself became a celebration not just of their love, but of the power of promises kept and family bonds strengthened through adversity. Emma walked down the aisle past the smiling faces of their families and friends, the people who had witnessed their journey from preschool promise to grown-up reality. Sophia beamed from her wheelchair in the front row, wearing her maid of honor dress with pride. Oliver waited at the altar, looking at Emma with the same earnest expression he'd worn when sharing his cookie all those years ago. In his pocket was the old Polaroid, tucked safely next to his vows. The ceremony included a surprise arranged by Oliver's best man. He'd tracked down Miss Peterson, their preschool teacher, now retired. She came forward with tears in her eyes, carrying a small time capsule she'd kept all these years. Inside was a video from that day in preschool, shaky footage showing little Oliver making his declaration of love while Emma shared her crayons in the background. Their vows included promises both old and new to share cookies, to never stop making up constellations together, to face whatever challenges life brought as a team. But most importantly, they promised to keep choosing each other every day, just as they had in preschool. Sophia's speech from her wheelchair brought everyone to tears. Some people spend their whole lives looking for true love, she said. My sister and Oliver were lucky enough to find it in preschool. But the real miracle isn't that they made that promise, it's that they kept choosing to keep it through every challenge and change. As Oliver and Emma shared their first dance under a canopy of stars, their gathered loved ones witnessed not just the culmination of a childhood promise, but the beginning of a new chapter. Their story became a reminder that sometimes the purest wisdom comes from children who don't yet know all the reasons love isn't supposed to work. They kept their preschool Polaroid framed in their living room, a reminder that the greatest love stories don't always follow the expected path. Sometimes they start with crayons and cookies, take detours through different cities and other relationships, face unexpected challenges, and still find their way home. Because sometimes the simplest promises turn out to be the most powerful ones. Sometimes love really is as simple as sharing your crayons and believing in each other. And sometimes happily ever after starts in preschool.